Please welcome our panelists. Namya Mahajan, Managing Director, Self-Employed Women's Association. Noella Musunka of Malika. Camille Caron, Director of Education, Sustainability, 3D Print at HP. Solver, Sarah Krasley, CEO, Shimmy Technologies. And our moderator, Hildreth England, Assistant Director, Plus Minus, Open Agricultural Initiative, MIT Media Lab.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, hi, good morning. Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the Media Lab. This is my home. I'm happy to be here to talk a little bit about with these wonderful ladies on this panel about designing solutions that drive change, which is an issue near and dear to my heart, particularly design that is for women, by women. And since we've got a lot of questions and a lot of ground to cover, I'm going to just go ahead and get right to it, get started. So this is for our panel at large, and this is just a general question. Tell us a little bit about, each of you please, some of the biggest and most inspiring things you're working on, the most exciting things you're working on right now, and then a little bit about the challenges you might have been facing as you move your mission forward for each of your organizations.
Sure. So I'm just going to...
Please, jump right in.
So I work in the Self-Employed Women's Association, which is a trade union and a network of organizations that work with informal women workers in India. So in India, more than 90% of the workforce is in the informal economy. The largest number of women work in agriculture as home-based workers or as service workers. And so at SEVA right now, we're looking at how do we build communities of garment workers, crafts workers, and help connect them to communities of designers. In agriculture, how do we, again, mobilize and collectivize women around issues of climate change and climate resilience? And on service, looking at how digital platforms and the gig economy can be used for the betterment of informal workers and how they can design systems that work for them rather than sort of with them. And broadly also we're looking at how to create an ecosystem around social security, around childcare that allows women to go to work and develop themselves as workers. So,
thanks, Namya.
Thank you.
So I'm Noella Musunka. So I founded Malika, my foundation, 12 years ago, where we empower girls and community with transforming and empowering them through education and community involvement. So we're excited because we have 314 students. Our students start at 5 years old until 18 years old. Now they are around 12 years old, and we're opening every year a classroom. It's a village where there's no water, where there's no electricity. So to be able to do our work, it's a lot of challenges. To work in Congo, where there was a political crisis, where there's a lot of refugees, where there's a lot of infrastructure problems. And even in order before to build a school, you needed to build wells. So sometimes when you want to build a school, you cannot just I had a dream just to build a school, but before even building the school, you needed to make a well in order to make the bricks. And when you see the disparity between parents and students, it makes us understand that it's very important to build a community center. So it's the reason now we're developing really the village through the school, the community center, where the community center teach the parents about writing, about hygiene, about health, about sewing jobs, about to the youth how to work with wood. And because the nutrition program is a huge problem in a village where the children maybe eat only twice a week, it was very important to have our own agricultural field where we grow our own food and it goes to the canteen. And through this program, we are able to give breakfast to the students when they arrive, and we're able to give them lunches. And our main focus was education. But we lost a student, Miriam, 2 years ago. She died between between Christmas at 6 years old, the same age as my boy, and she died over less than 48 hours for malaria. So for us, it was a wake-up call. You cannot do education without health, and you need to invest in girls' education and really follow the health. So we just inaugurated the Student Health Center, where we really emphasize on health of the student. We call on a name, and we decided to work with different organizations to distribute it every year some malaria net for the village, and we use a lot of peer women to go to talk to the village and the community. And over the last few years, we distributed 11,000 malaria net that really bring down the way children were dying and families. But there's a lot of awareness too, because you need to explain them it's not a blanket, the malaria net. You have to hang it, it's not to go to fish, you cannot go to resell it. So it's a lot of challenges, but we use women to really go to every door, to every family's community, and we bring a lot of awareness through our students at the school, where it's a holistic program we're offering. So it's very exciting to see them growing and to see the village coming together with the student at school, with the community, and how they work together. And they know these problems, and I believe they know the solutions too.
Yeah. Camille, what are some of the most exciting or inspiring things that you're working on right now?
So at HP, I'm really, really happy to be part of the 3D print organization. So we're working on additive manufacturing, which is really going to change industrial production manufacturing as we know it. What I focus on is education and sustainability. Now on the education front, really, how do we take and develop the next generation of talent that we're going to need to be able to radically change the way we design and make things? What sort of programs do we need to put into place, innovative curriculum, and ultimately, how do we really start driving and shifting that mindset that is so critical to changing how we build things? The other half of what I work on, putting on my other hat around sustainability, is really centered on 4 different areas. Circular economy. How do we put into place the right recycling, take-back programs to make sure that as we're producing goods, that we're also looking at the offload products as well. Sustainable design and manufacturing. What could we be doing better with all of our customers in terms of the behavior, playing matchmaker? Where can we offset our carbon footprint? Of course, health and safety of all workers that are out there is really near and dear. So when we're looking at different topics around what do we need to do as you're running and operating our machines. And I think the last one is workforce of the future, which ties into my education mandate as well too. And I'm really excited about really figuring out the ways to bridge between college and career, develop that diverse and inclusive workforce that will really help bring new ideas to product development as well too. And ultimately, I hear a lot about girls in STEM at this panel. Something that on a personal level, being a mom of 2 daughters, both who have just started their first jobs and sort of coaching and mentoring them, how to take everything that we're doing and really start to influence early on when we can really make some changes in that mindset and that growth. So yeah, that's my little piece of the world right now.
Nice. So I'm Sarah Krasley. I'm the CEO of Shimmy Technologies. We're one of the Solver teams proudly in the Future of Work cohort this past season. And our focus is really around preparing the apparel industry for automation. So like Camille, we have the same affliction of just being fascinated by how things are designed and manufactured. And right now, pretty much everything you're wearing, most of what's in this building, was made by probably a woman pushing material through a sewing machine. And that's changing. Already, there's automation in many large garment factories, and that automation is removing a really significant and important pathway for women in communities to get work and to build up. So we're trying to intervene in this big change that's afoot, and we've developed a little video game that teaches sewing machine operators basic digital skills. So they're learning things like digital pattern making, they're learning how to make markers, We know that the future of buying is going to be AR and VR experiences. We all want more inclusive sizing. We all want clothes that actually fit us and make us feel confident. All of that is going to require digital models, and we want to see if we can retrain this workforce that has great skills and is in danger and vulnerable of job loss for automation to have those jobs of the future. And it's a predominantly female workforce, which is personally really exciting for me.
Yeah, it's half the world's population.
Right.
That's exciting. Power. All right. Well, so it sounds there's a nice theme here, which also revolves around designing the infrastructure that's needed to support women as they're either moving forward in career changes, as they're being educated to provide the skills necessary for future industries. So I want to talk a little bit about designing this infrastructure for women and designing it by women. So Namya, in Seva's work, much like with Shimmy Technologies, you're ultimately grounded in investing in women. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how Seva is linking women to the feelings of security around even food security, income security clearly, but also just sort of generally job or social security, how that is important and why it's important to tackle those feelings of security, or this sort of designing the infrastructure around how women are able to provide work and in your case get credit, right, to continue their work.
Yeah. I was actually nodding along to everything Noella was saying, because I think women are so rooted to their families and their communities that working on just one issue is not enough. So at Seva, we have, over the last 45 years, we've developed 11 questions around, incomes, jobs, access to credit, social security, which for us means health, childcare, insurance, basic pensions. Because we've seen that if you want to lift people out of poverty, if you want to give them an equal chance, a shock in any one of those areas brings you right back to poverty. So, after natural disasters or after riots, when we work in camps, women say, thank you for the food, but give us work, give us a way to move forward out of this when it's done. Our bank, which is now sort of started 40 years ago, it's a 200,000 women institution, $15 million. And it's always had repayment rates of over 90%. But when we went to women who defaulted on their loans, we saw it was usually because there was an illness in the family that wiped out their savings. There was a death in the family that meant no more work, no more income. So we think it's incomplete to work on one piece of the puzzle and not on these holistic issues. And at Seva, we have the Seva Bank that does microcredit. We have an insurance cooperative that provides healthcare, life insurance, accident insurance. We're looking at crop insurance. We have education and training so that you can go forward in your work. We have a childcare cooperative because women have huge care responsibilities that they can't let go of when they go to work, and that dooms them to an employment situation that's lower paid, has less opportunities for advancement and growth. So I think what we've seen is that you have to work holistically. You have to work with a group of institutions in the public sector, in the private sector, and you have to work with communities to build solutions that work for them and work with them.
Excellent. Noella, this sort of builds on what you were saying about addressing the health in the communities where you're working, that's just as important. So the malaria nets being able to be distributed, and also that helps girls get to school, right? And get them into the education system early. Could you talk to us a little bit about how education is really sort of this core empowering piece for girls, and that as we're talking about holistic infrastructure for women to succeed, let's talk about attitudes, right? Belief in ourselves, and how Malaika is working with girls to empower them and give them the sort of self-efficacy and confidence and belief in themselves as they move forward in education.
So for me, I'm a big advocate in education in rural villages because they are forgotten, and I think they will be key players in the continent, especially in Africa. When you look, 49 million and half in sub-Saharan girls don't attend school, 7 million in Congo. So when we started to work in this village, because my father died when I was 5, and my mom didn't have any money to keep me, so she gave me away. I was the only child. And I went back 13 years after, and my mom was living on the real poverty, and she was not educated. So you have to educate women, you have to educate girls, and to see so many children that were out of school. But what is very amazing is when we started to build the school, and when the school happened in a village, it was you needed to talk to the chief of the village to tell him, we're going to do a girls' school. And for them, it was like nonsense. Why a girls' school? Why not a boys' school? Why are we going to send girls first? Because they help us at home. When the students arrive at school at 5 years old, you need to teach them to go to use the toilet because they never use a toilet in their life. You need to teach them to eat with a fork and a knife. You need to, but more and more, they're becoming more confident in the schools, and it's becoming their refuge. We offer them a space to dream, to imagine what they want to become, to question themselves, and we really emphasize on the teachers' training and really upgrading the curriculum of a school and investing in girls' education. And through Malaika School, we want to become a role model of the schools in Congo, where it will push the government and will push other institutions. That is very important to invest not only in education, but to invest in high quality education. So the curriculum that we've been offering is through art, is through music, through sport, through STEM programs. I read an amazing story of Professor Jonathan Boyo Esolo, that he was between life and death at 3 years old. At 7, 8, he was one of the worst students, and then he became one of the best students. And I read the story, and I said, oh my God, he's from Congo. Then he was sent in Cambridge, he was sent in Harvard. So I contacted him, and I say, to make forward, move forward, and he's here actually, ask him to come, he's taking pictures. I contacted him, and I say, I need you become a mentor to the students because they will feel related to you. And the girls' school in a village, if you can teach us, you can strengthen the STEM program, something that is innovative in a village. And if you can, we can make in place the coding and etc. He said, I'm busy, Noella. But then I said, do one Skype with the students. And he did the Skype, and he really fell in love, and he started to really mentoring them. He went there a few months ago, and it's amazing to see the girls now in this village. They have computers, they have STEM programs. We noticed that 2 students are really amazing that we would like to do to bring in Boston for a summer program. But the way the girls are going to school and the way they're going back to their home where they sleep on the floor, where if they were not coming to a school, they won't have shoes and underwear, they will not have, at 14 years, now the older girls are 14 years old, so we're going through the system of a menstruation pad, you call that? Menstruation period. It's really an evolving situation with girls, and what is important is that these students in the village need to feel that education will bring them somewhere. In the formal education in Africa, you needed to become engineer, lawyer, parents wanted to send you to become all these big jobs. But we need to start to understand too that they can become whatever they want, and we need to invest too in technical vocational training. Not everybody will become a doctor, not everybody will become a lawyer or a journalist. And we're seeing with them that some of them telling us that they want to become an architect, they want to become a journalist. But these girls in the middle of this village, they are the voice of millions of villages all over Africa. And it's very beautiful to see that.
It's interesting too.
Thank you.
Agreed. We're talking about perception, right? Self-belief, and that can help lift you up out of poverty. That women sort of need not only infrastructure but also this perception that I'm capable. Camille, I wonder if we can talk a little bit about inherent bias and sort of this idea that women are unbankable, and that the perception, especially starting with girls, it starts early, and it's something that gets sort of adopted even by women, right?
Yeah.
So if you could chat a little bit about that, especially as a leader in 3D printing and in product development, and how we might counter messages early on
Yeah, and I think, and it's really an important part around having belief in yourself. When we think, I'll answer it in two parts, right? There's what we can do early in the school years to change and reframe the language that girls use about their own abilities. When we think about, again, not comparing girls to boys and their skill sets, that girls are good at math, not as good as, right? And how, as parents, educators, influencers, how do we change that dynamic of how we even talk about their skills? To develop that belief in I really know how to do this, I am good at this. I like to tell the story, a very personal story. My daughter, my oldest one, she was in 8th grade, and she came back from school, and I actually got a call from one of the teachers saying that she had declined being part of the Mathletes competition. And I thought, oh my gosh, am I sitting in like a Mean Girls episode here where this is like, social suicide? And I was like, why don't you want to be there? And she's like, well, I don't know, am I going to be viewed as too smart or too geeky? And I thought, this is one of those specific moments where it's like, no, you're going. You're really going to appreciate it. And she did join and moved on to great things. She just finished her master's in science and biomechanics and is a product manager herself now. So I think early in those years, balancing the equation, teaching boys to become girls' allies, really reframing the language, and providing those something when I was working on 3D printing exercises in K-12, was providing those environments where the teacher is the coach, and the ones that have the skills, you can bring them to the table in a different way, not necessarily always just facing forward in the classroom. So you can really account for some of the different styles of learning and the different approaches, that diversity, not just gender, but also just introvert, extrovert. I think on the flip side, sort of moving forward into the product development piece, one of the key parts, and this was touched upon yesterday in the tech, inequality in tech session, Gio Ito brought up the example of machine learning, AI. And how if you're missing data, you might not be training that AI as best you can. This could have huge ramifications in healthcare, in how we automate manufacturing and approach other sort of places where technology, machine learning is the easy way to solve a problem. But I also think from a product manager's perspective, making sure that we actually are considering all of our users, not just who we think our ideal user is, not just the default reference mail data example, but how do we also just really empathize, because it's really hard to put yourself into a position to see somebody else's perspective. And that is where I think, again, pairing the data, addressing that data gap, making sure that we have all users included, and that we do form the belief within the girls early on that they can do this, they are good at this, and honestly, it's hard work. It's not innate intelligence or genius that's going to get you forward.
Yeah, there's, Dana Boyd calls it the data void, right?
Yeah.
That we're talking about this massive gap in data. I mean, I don't know if you guys know this, but scientifically, we still don't know why women go into labor. I mean, we're talking about half of the world's population. This is one of the oldest healthcare problems, let's say, and it's not even a problem. But so a data gap is a huge thing to address. We're talking about half of the world's population. Yeah. And we're also talking about designing the environment, right? But then also the tools that enable women to move forward. So Sarah, I want to move to you and talk specifically about designing for your users. Yeah. If you can tell us a little bit about, just expanding on gender gaps specifically, talking about designing for the other 50% of the population, and how, when you launched Shimmy, before that you were a product designer.
Yeah.
So how did you make Shimmy useful for your end users?
Yeah, well, I was actually a product manager, but it's very meta because I was a product manager for product designers and engineers. But anyway, and the organization I was in was about 90% male and 10% female. I was around men all the time. I was in car factories and furniture factories, and I just thought, well, great, I can take all these skills that I've learned about digital transformation in those industries, and I can apply it to this other one. I can build products for a female workforce, and I can build a culture in my company that reflects my values. You know, I'm very proud that my team is predominantly female. Many of them are from garment-producing countries. And that's been a really nice way to look at all the ways in my life that I've pushed and pulled myself to retain my femininity, but still be a strong leader. And the managing back and forth of when you're only the only female in the room, when you're 10 to 20 years younger than everybody else in the room. So that's been a really nice learning experience for me over the past 2 years at the helm of my own company. In these garment factories, it's very much like in Bangladeshi episode of Mad Men. It's like all of the technical rooms are filled with men. You even ask, what's the name of this job or this job? Oh, that's CAD man and that's marker man. Like the job titles are not even gender neutral. So we thought, okay, first metric, let's take care of that. We read a lot of Jane McGonigal and looked at, how can we structure this game so that it's a really a very supportive environment for these women. We learned that multiplayer games are a great way for people to collaborate with one another and make for a really nice learning environment. We were very deliberate in the design of the user experience. Many women are scared to even work on a computer because they don't even have smartphones. So we allowed the interface to be piloted with touch and voice commands. We taught IBM Watson some Bangla and some Indonesian, so that the workers could simply say the names of these two-dimensional shapes. And then in the background, it's a reciprocal apprenticeship AI. So that AI is learning and feeding the workers, and it makes for a mutually beneficial situation.
Yeah, it's changing the culture.
Yeah, and I want to say one more thing. To Camille's points, we are able to show an argument to a factory owner that these women can do this technical work just as fast as the CAD man and the marker man. So if you don't care about UN SDG goals, at least care about accuracy and speed. And that's been really wonderful. In our last pilot in Indonesia, the factory owner said we never would have moved these women into a career path to operate these machines where their wage will increase, their hours will be better, and we're really happy that we're helping move that pipeline.
Yeah, it's shifting ideas about what women's work includes.
That's right.
So talking a little bit about shifting culture, Namya, I want to talk a little bit how Seva has been, you talk a lot about how the women's work, we were talking about street vendors earlier, is largely unseen. It wasn't even considered a trade when Seva got started. And because the work is not counted, it sort of remains invisible. And so to drive change for women forward, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you've been able to make this work visible and how that might apply, or what lessons you've learned that would apply elsewhere in the world.
Sure. So Seva at its heart is a trade union of women in the informal economy. We have 1.5 million members in 15 states of India, and they work in 100 different trades. But those are trades that did not perhaps exist. So the concept of a home-based worker, somebody who was in their home stitching, rolling cigarettes, making kites, this was something that was actually resisted as a trade both by formal sector workers who said these women are taking our jobs. These women are not actually workers, they're just working on the side. And even today, when we go to communities and we ask women, what do you do? They're like, oh, we just stay at home. And then I'm like, but I see that stitching machine, is that yours? And they say, yeah, I guess I do earn a little bit on the side when I'm not doing my other work, right? Because care work, there's been studies that show that women do 5 hours of care work on average per day, while men do half an hour, right? So the first step, I think, is convincing the woman that you are a worker. Informal workers constitute 90% of India's workforce. Around 40% of its GDP, 60% of its exports, telling them that you are valuable to the country, to the world. You constitute these supply chains. Women generally do the work that has the most drudgery. So they also do 60% of India's agricultural labor. But when you think farmer, you think of a dude with a mustache carrying a spade, right? You're not thinking of the woman who's actually in the field sowing. So we have, about half our membership is women farmers. So taking their issues to the government, to companies, saying, look, don't just think the farmer is the person who owns the land. The farmer is the person who tills the land. Dairy farmers, women do all of the work around dairy except the thing of actually taking the milk to the market. Women do so much work in their homes, in the supply chain, but they're not considered workers. So I think the point of SEVA has been to make this work visible to policymakers, to sort of international groups. The ILO actually made it included home-based workers as a trade. On the basis of SEVA's advocacy, we built a global network of home-based workers called HomeNet. And really all of that goes into making policies that help women. Once you're considered as a worker, people think, okay, maybe these women need childcare. How do we do this? Once you think of it, you think of, social security for farmers, for home-based workers, which were not concepts that existed that would come to you. So I think at its heart thinking, poor women are working women is the thought that sort of hit me when I first moved to SEVA from McKinsey, which was a totally different kind of working woman. But looking at these women as working women helps inform so much of what I think and what I hope you will take back as well.
Does anybody else on the panel have anything to add to that? Otherwise, we'll just move to our last question.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is really the policies pieces, right?
Holistic
so
culture.
yeah, the holistic view of when you think about the examples of if you need childcare at home, if you, to get to an event, being able to bring your kids with you, looking at what has to happen in education around again, providing that equal access and what that means. I think it's really, really important to really consider it at that ecosystem level. And what can we learn from what we're doing in emerging and bringing it back to, I guess, when you describe working women, I was going, yeah, that's true. Because, I mean, I work in the Bay Area. And so when I think of working women, I think of tech, right? But there's a whole sphere and spectrum out there to account for.
Yeah, it's not all shoulder pads and high heels.
Yeah, exactly.
It's true. Well, and so one thing also that I think this brings up, which is interesting, and we were talking about this a little bit backstage, is this by dint of necessity, right? Innovation comes from moments when you're solving a problem, whether that's in your home or you're in Silicon Valley, that it's a broad need for something that starts with a tiny need for something, and that women are just as capable of finding innovation or room for innovation. So that's our last question for the panel, which is that in one sentence, could you describe why we need innovation for women and perhaps more importantly, by women? So we'll start with Sarah and we'll work this way.
I'm just going to do a two-word sentence. Why not?
Fair. Okay, Camille.
I would just layer onto that one and say because of different perspectives.
Okay.
Coming from Africa, definitely we need more women. We have only one president woman on the continent right now out of 54 countries. So yeah, the change and the movement building will come definitely from women coming from lower position up to the top. I want to see at least 10 women presidents in Africa and having key roles, and we will see the effect domino of the change happening in the continent and for different countries. Excellent. And I think all the girls on the ground will really have even bigger role models.
We've been waiting so many years for the men to do it. I think it's time. but in all seriousness, over the last 40 years, we've seen women take on challenges that are, unthinkable for most of us, and they deal with them every day. And if they're brought together in groups and they're given the opportunity, we've seen amazing things happen, and I want to see more of them. We need to see more of them.
Excellent. Well, that is our panel on innovation for and by women. Thank you guys for being here and for having a listen to these lovely, lovely ladies on the panel. So I want to join me in a round of applause for.
And we're on time. We still have 3 minutes 25.
I know, we do have time. And I don't know if there are questions in the audience. We have time for maybe one. If not, I invite the panelists to also continue in this conversation. Otherwise, we'll take off and give you guys a breather. Are there any questions? If you have a question, you have to project so everyone can hear you. Yes?
If you guys, you have one thing that you could tell everyone here to do in their daily life to support your musicians in general and for young girls in general, what would that one action be?
Did everyone hear the question? If you had one thing to tell everybody in this room about what they could do to help move forward your mission and vision, what would that be? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Fund women.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Fund us.
Fund women.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Make sure to listen actively and help women and girls find their voice, and so they're there to be funded.
Yeah.
I think partnership is very key.
Partnership.
Partnership to do anything and to be able is to have the strong team, the right partners, and to have the support of your friends, your family, and really, really believe in anything that you do. I think it has to come in the world we're living. I think passion and authenticity is very, very, very important. And it's very hard to be in a woman panel discussion because I'm a mother of a boy and a girl. And coming back to you is like your girl didn't want to be too
I know, too geeky, exactly.
But my son, he doesn't want to excel too much because he says, Mom, all the best students in the classroom are girls. I feel bad if I excel well because all my friends, I play football with them, they will look at me like, oh my God, you dig it. So it's very well. And my daughter is different. Oh, I want to be one of the best. I want to do this. So it's not easy to have a boy and girl and having the conversation because I go with my kids every year in Congo. They've been 20 times. And my boy and my girl, and my boy pushed me to do more things for boys. And my girls, she liked the girls. And you have for their own balance to find the equilibrium, how you're gonna show that we need boys to be successful too, and to bring them in the conversation of woman by woman and etc. So
I think as Camille said earlier too, it's also making sure that we've got our male allies behind us, right? So that it's women, for women, by women, but also that we...
with men, somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And Namya?
Yeah, I guess just be aware of who is in the room and who is not in the room, right? So when you're making design decisions or decisions on companies or education or whatever, just be mindful of who is not present and who you need to bring in to talk, whose voice is not being heard. I think in every room you're in, if you start being more mindful of that, it will already start making a difference.
Excellent. Okay, we're out of time. Thank you guys.